A journey that's on no timetable. The last journey. About 400 old coaches make it in Britain each week. A coach is doomed when it's 30 years old. By then, it's traveled on average 2.5 million miles. When a coach is burned, 3/4 is recovered as scrap, enough to make 50 new motor cars. For years, only a fraction was ever used to make a new train. The world railway scene, one of almost universal gloom. In Britain alone, rolling stock cut by over a half in 20 years. But railways are entering their first revolutionary period of development since the discovery of steam and the age of the iron horse. The prospect, a transport revival that may change our habits, even affect the place we live in. The revolution of the super trains. A spruce up for the world's first super train, the Japanese Tokaido Express. For half a century, train speeds remained unchanged. Now, technology opens the prospect of dwarfing the velocities that once were thought absolute. Not all the new trains will have wheels, but even the old iron horse is promised an incredible new lease of life. Among those backing the iron horse is British Rail's research chief, Stanley Smith.
Not so long ago, it was thought that the maximum speed of steel wheels on steel rails was about 100 miles an hour. In the last few years, it's been shown that it's technically feasible to run speeds at least 150 miles an hour with steel wheels on steel rails, and probably at speeds appreciably higher than that. So as our knowledge increases, so the potential application of steel wheels and steel rails is extending. And my own personal view is that we shall probably not reach the limit of steel wheels on steel rails at speeds much below about 300 miles an hour.
Will travel on the new trains be as novel an experience as the first iron horse was in the days of the stagecoach? The pioneer of the linear motor, which will power one of Britain's future trains, Professor Eric Laithwaite.
I think to some extent you've got to train the passengers to expect something rather more dramatic. One can easily envisage a high-speed link between, say, London and Glasgow, starting off with a loudspeaker system saying, "We are about to start, ladies and gentlemen, will you please fasten your safety belts?" And you can take off with a half G, if necessary, as you do with an aircraft.
Despite the decline, Britain is still one of the densest railway countries in the world. London Bridge. At commuter time, 100 trains pass here each hour. In the congestion of the 70s, land will be at a premium. Airports more crowded, harder to reach. 35 acres of land are claimed for every mile of motorway. But a guided system like a railway needs only a fraction of the space to carry a far greater traffic. When super trains are introduced in Britain in the mid-70s, people will cross half the country in the time it takes these commuters simply to go to work. The train revivalists base their predictions on a worldwide discovery that if you increase the speed of a train by 1 mile an hour, you get 1% more passengers. Speed can make a railway pay. Central Station, Tokyo. The world's fastest train, the Tokaido Express. At peak hours, it leaves every 5 or 10 minutes. And there's no rushing around. For cleaners and passengers, wait in queues that face each door. The train always stops at exactly the same place. The line is run like a commuter service. Yet each train travels 340 miles, linking Tokyo with Osaka, Japan's two biggest towns, as far apart as London and Edinburgh. Journey time, only 3 hours. The Tokaido train is different technically from the super train planned in Britain, but its lessons apply to us. Tokaido users have trebled in 5 years. Speed attracts passengers, and speed on that scale can profoundly affect the pattern of life in a country. The train travels along a corridor housing 40% of Japan's population. Despite the top speed of 130 miles an hour, some of the trains manage to take in a dozen stops. So, in the wake of the super train, new local industries and a vast new suburbia have sprung up along the railway. Curves slow down trains. The Japanese were the first with a super train because they built a brand new track almost wholly straight, with 67 tunnels bored through the volcanic rock. Britain's engineers plan to make us travel at 150 miles an hour on the curvaceous track laid down by our ancestors last century. To deter trespassers, the track is elevated. So for these guinea pigs of the supertrain era, there's little sense of speed as the scenery is far below. Little chance for scientists to study the psychological problems of high speed being predicted for the people who travel on supertrains in Europe. So the travelers won't forget they're still pioneers. There's a reminder of Japan's achievement. Over 200 kilometers an hour, 130 miles. And it's the world's first railway without signals. Information about train movements is processed centrally in Tokyo. Orders go out to each driver by an electronic signal. Trains run 4 miles apart. Controllers watch to make sure they don't get closer. And there's a radio link to brief drivers about danger on the line. In the panoply of safety, there are even crosswind calculators perched on 30 bridges. Trains are told to slow down in a strong breeze to avoid buffeting. Airline-type seats to relax and forget that the train is going as fast as an airliner when it lands. The seats can be reversed for the return journey. And to protect the eardrums, a signal picked up from the track automatically seals the coach before entering a tunnel. The techniques pioneered in Japan should save Britain a few teething problems when it too joins the super train club. Midnight in Tokyo. The day's last Tokaido train returns to Tokyo Central. High speed has cut out the need for night trains, and freight trains are barred altogether, for they might churn up the tracks. For Japan's rail engineers, it's time now to enjoy another privilege that'll be denied the makers of Europe's super trains. Complete repossession of their track for 6 hours of every night, when they can count the cost of being a world leader. Costs soar when very high speeds are sustained. On the Tokaido line, wheels must be reground every 10 days. High speed plays havoc with the track, too. It needs constant reballasting and realigning. So a special test vehicle, bristling with electronic fault detectors, is packed off for a 340-mile inspection run down the line, all the way to Osaka. Maintenance gangs await in the darkness. The line must be back to scratch before the world's longest commuter service reopens at dawn. Europe makes a more hesitant entry into the age of the supertrain. Exercising discreetly in a country lane, this gas turbine engine, it's the first hardware built for the APT, or Advanced Passenger Train, Britain's first supertrain. It's designed as a lorry engine, but 8 of them will be enough to drive the APT up to 150 miles an hour. The gas turbine is cheaper than electric power, and it'll help the APT be only half the weight of today's trains. Still only a model, but the APT will be the most revolutionary train ever built. So it can corner at speed. It'll even have a hydraulic control to tilt it over on the curves. But there's another aid to higher speed. New rails. Welding the 60-footers from the steel mill into a giant length up to 10 miles long. Long rails not only please passengers by cutting down noise, they please the railways by reducing wear on wheels. Long rails account for only 1/6 of Britain's network of 25,000 miles, but they're being laid faster now. For on the eve of the supertrain, the railways are worried by a rise in derailments caused by faulty rails. Rails fit for tomorrow's travellers. But how to find the wheels for tomorrow's trains? Railways are plagued by hunting, the tendency of wheels to wobble at speed, a possible cause of derailment. On the computer, new suspensions can be tested to any speed without damaging a real train. Programmed with today's train, the computer shows hunting at 100 miles an hour. But take the train up to 150, and the trace, gone mad, shows almost certain derailment. Now feed in the APT's design, and hunting at 150 mph is still noticeable, but safe enough. The APT's problem won't be how to stay on the rails, but how to stop itself. An expert, the editor of Modern Railways, Geoffrey Freeman Allen.
If we get up to 150 miles an hour, then the sort of braking needed to bring the train to rest within the spacing of the existing signals is getting too fierce. We're talking in terms of something like 0.2 G. And you simply can't apply brakes at that force without the risk of having people on their feet in the gangway of a coach being thrown off their feet. So far as catering is concerned, it may be a case of nosebags rather than being able to have cups standing on trays because they're going to be knocked over.
But haute cuisine on the British supertrain shouldn't be a nightmare of splashing food. At Derby, engineers are working on a scheme to ensure a ride free from violent braking. Their project is far more ambitious than Japan's train control system. For the idea is to give each train its own computer, fed for the journey with a punch card bearing the train's vital statistics. With higher speed, a driver has less chance to spot signals in time. In Japan, they solve the problem by having one central computer. In Britain, all the processing will be done on board the train. Here, too, a train won't ever be more than a phone call away.
Have you fed the information into the priming unit? Yes, card has been inserted.
Right. Could you move away, please? And we'll do 1 or 2 checks of the line.
The computer will pick up news about the track ahead, like signals and speed limits, from electronic cables between the rails.
Hello, this is the control room calling the train. Is everything performing satisfactory?
The computer now knows about the track and the train. It works out the speed the driver should go at, and it'll ring a bell to warn him if he exceeds it. There's a screen, so the computer can keep telling the driver what to do, and it'll even work out his exact position.
Location, 3.6 kilometres. Green aspect. Target distance, 1.5
Target,
kilometres.
the new word for the old signal. The computer will see to it that the driver is never taken by surprise.
Tunnel section. Could you give me a readout, please, on your display?
Of course, all the old signals will stay, for the sake of old-fashioned trains. There'll be thousands of those still around, sharing the same tracks, but without a friendly computer to remind the driver to hoot before entering a tunnel.
Yes. Did your whistle telegram come in, all right?
Yes, very
Fine.
correctly.
Thank you.
Il a un plateau qui fait une dizaine de kilos. Il avance dans un espace qui est extrêmement étroit.
Preparing rail staff for the super trains isn't only a question of electronics. At a school for train waiters in France, there are now lectures on how to stay on your feet.
Sans bousculer les personnes qui se trouvent autour de lui. Il va avancer alors que les gens...
The instructor is a dining car veteran of 500,000 miles. The lectures can teach only the theory of the job.
Sans perdre l'équilibre, n'est-ce pas? Le train aborde une courbe. À ce moment-là, il faut à nouveau rétablir l'équilibre de la démarche. Avancer...
To graduate, the recruits will have to carry their 20-pound trays on a real train.
Ni gêner les gens qui sont assis, n'est-ce pas? Et sans justement perdre.
In France, waiters tend to stay on the same route. This way, they come to learn that some curves are better than others for serving the soup course.
Portez, avancez.
Motormen in the super train age will be a special breed too, cosseted by scientists with all the care lavished before on airline pilots. The Japanese, already well into the super train era, now find that they must use airline aptitude tests to recruit train drivers. At Euston Station in London, British Rail are conducting an experiment to see what makes an engine driver tick. Literally. It's the first study of a driver's heart rate, a bid to find out his worries on a trip and how to overcome them in an age when alertness will be at a premium. Chest shaving and then rubber stamping to make sure the electrodes aren't stuck in the wrong spot. For nearly a year, that's been the lot of driver Ian Bonner, 41-year-old father of 5, but the lesson learnt could mean safer trains tomorrow.
Don't take it out on the passengers.
No.
The average heart rate, about 90. People in some jobs can sustain a far higher rate for long hours, like 140 for racing drivers. No one ever bothered to measure a train driver's before.
Put them in your pockets. Yeah.
A pocket transmitter will broadcast Bonner's heartbeat to the scientist at the back of the engine. There's no trailing cable, so he won't feel distracted. One of British Rail's hopes, to find out how a driver reacts to signals. He'd passed nearly 400 on a trip from London to Liverpool. Some rail scientists claim a driver could still take in that many at speeds of up to 125 miles an hour.
Everything's running nicely. At a nice steady speed of 75 miles an hour. Bit of a crossing there.
For matching with the heart record, an inspector sings out changes in the train speed. He describes the scenery. Scientists later will pore over the two records in a bid to fathom the driver's reaction to the moving world about him.
We are now coming up to Watford Tunnel. Entering Watford Tunnel at a nice speed of 92 miles an hour. Leaving Watford Tunnel now, 92 miles an hour.
With super trains and more automation on the way, rail scientists want to reduce a driver's anxiety, but equally to stop him getting bored.
Driver holding the straight, steady speed nicely. 100 miles an hour dead.
Many factors can influence a driver's heart rate, including conditions in his cab. The super train designers are closely following this project. British Rail's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sharp Grant, explains why.
We don't want to make the driver too hot or too cold. We want to be sure that he is seated, not in a lounging position, but seated comfortably, so that when he rises from his seat, his back is not sore. We also hope to find out whether or not the lower edge of the window should be higher than in the present cab, whether we should ensure that he is not involved in seeing too much of the track at one time. The railways of the world have had problems of what they call flicker fusion, which can be mentally upsetting to the driver. They see the track, one sleeper after another, merging, as it were, into one, and this can be upsetting in various ways. Familiarity with the track is supplementary to the mechanical aids that the driver has in his cab. You can imagine a driver in the train of today going along, say, through a tunnel. He knows the beginning of the tunnel, he knows when it will end. He gets familiar with that. He goes along the countryside, he sees a farm, he's familiar with that. And he knows the exact time at which the lady of the house will come and feed her chickens. Now, if, for example, that farmhouse was burned down, we would be a little anxious about that. That might be recorded in our heartbeat project. There is nobody more knowledgeable about the countryside through which he passes than the driver. He knows every tree very often. He knows if a telegraph post has been knocked down. That's a visual aid, but one could also talk about smells. He recognized the smell of, say, a sewage farm nearing one of the intermediate towns. That's the smell, which is also a very useful supplementary aid. Now, we have never been able to scientifically assess the effect of these various factors on the driver. So we feel that it is very important to do this prior to embarking on the APT.
But are speed and safety enough? To get to the train at all, there's the sub-journey from home to the platform. That too may influence how quickly we flock back to the railways.
One environmental factor that will need looking at, I think, is that of stations. There are plenty of stations on British Rail now which simply aren't good enough for the intercity services that they're operating. I can think of one immediately in Nottingham Midland, which looks like a cross between a Wesleyan chapel and a public lavatory. And it seems to me that unless you're going to be able to make the whole journey door to door more attractive with the APT, if it's still going to take you the same time to find somewhere to park your car and then get off, get your way into an old-fashioned station, find out where the booking office is and so on and so forth, you're going to lose half the commercial advantage of this higher speed. It's going to be like getting out of a jet plane and into a horse and buggy.
Sigmund Freud, discoverer of psychoanalysis half a century ago, was so worried about missing his train that he was to arrive at the station an hour early. He called his symptoms travel fever. Travel fever comes under scrutiny in a report of the International Union of Railways. It says conditions in many stations give a traveller muscular and nervous fatigue before he's even set foot on the train. Stations lack seats. They may lack clear information. Especially in a big town, the difficulty of reaching a station has already made a traveller fearful of missing his train. Today, says the report, a calm passenger is a rarity. Travellers, says the report, intensely want to be reassured. They're not satisfied with a notice board, but want to hear about their train when buying their ticket. And if there's a delay, a timely announcement could act as a psychological caress. The airlines have humanized travel by employing women on a vast scale. But, the report complains, the railways continue to be a masculine-orientated industry. Also in need of improvement, the access to trains. They're getting lengthier, so you've longer to hike, weighted down with bags. The report notes, with concern, that passengers in every country tend to wear dark clothes when going by train because of a persisting belief that railways are dirty. So, says the report, trains should have brighter colours. Like an airliner's, a train interior should appeal to women, yet not be so feminine as to irritate the male. But coach designers should keep off green because it can induce travel sickness. A seat at last. But there's another worry, what the report calls static fatigue, sitting in the same place for hours. Film taken by British railway scientists to study why people become restless in trains. The aim, to help design an ideal seat. Travellers were filmed on a 5-hour journey from London to Edinburgh with a special camera exposing one frame every 10 seconds. The film was analysed frame by frame, each leg crossing and fidget counted. Men were more restless than women, with no less than 50 different postures. Women rated fewer than 40. One surprising result, more first-class passengers slumped in their seats than second class. In laboratory conditions, the search goes on for the common denominator of rail comfort. A volunteer sits for hours, as he would on a train journey. By operating switches, he can make any part of his chair move. His search for the most relaxing posture is plotted. More data for the super-trained designer. On old trains, weight didn't matter, but the new seat must be only a third as heavy as today's. To cover the future train seat, a new nylon net. It's being tested here, the hard way. The material was first used for seats in the American space program because it allowed astronauts to adopt many different postures. The train version is more rigid, but so strong that only 2 inches would support an adult. Now, after months of development, the curtain is rung up at last on the first train seat of the space age. The prototype goes on display at an international conference of railway executives in London. The advanced passenger train will be all aluminium and streamlining. There'll be no luggage racks, for at 150 miles an hour, the super train has to have a low center of gravity, and the seats will be low slung too.
This is the first time, actually, I think any of our colleagues from abroad would have had the opportunity to experience this. Get some expert opinion.
James, I've heard so much about it. Very glad to.
No, do be just as critical as you
Well,
like, but
it fits me well.
I mean, would you say that he was an average Swede in terms of?
Perhaps a little smaller.
Yeah.
This chair looks a bit like a glorified garden chair to a passenger entering a railway carriage.
But British Rail can take carping. They say they've done more study of passenger ergonomics than any other transport body in the world. But there could be more than physical problems to be overcome. The professor of psychology at Manchester University, John Cohen.
The increased speed of trains, as projected, will, for a time, create a new type of anxiety and stress for some people. Everything becomes very blurred when you travel at 150 or 200 miles an hour. This can cause serious headaches. And if this goes to any great length, you can even sort of lose your mental balance. You can get into a panic, the so-called sensory deprivation state of mental imbalance. The railway passenger will be in much the same position as the air passenger and will have to be treated in the same way. He'll suffer the same feeling of isolation and encapsulation and claustrophobia and loss of touch with reality, and will need to be attended to and reassured.
The soothing announcement. The trappings of air travel already abound on European trains. As on aircraft, windows will have to get smaller as speed grows. A French expert believes they'll eventually have to move up to the ceiling, so no one is disturbed by the view. As trains edge towards aircraft in speed, railways will exploit more and more their greater spaciousness. By air, this dog would have to fly as cargo, but he can board the train with a dog ticket that's only a fraction of a human fare. Already, trains are using their space to offer the joys of a mini-town on wheels. This is the Mistral, linking Paris and Nice. Not a super train yet, it only does 100. But aboard, you can dictate a letter, book a hire car to meet you at the other end, or go shopping. Hostesses patrol reassuringly. And there's always a queue for the hairdressing salon. Round the world, railways are dreaming up new ideas to woo us back to the track. In Canada, mobile bingo halls. In Japan, a Turkish bath on wheels. In France, 100-mile-an-hour ballrooms and chapels for Christmas revelers. The railways will oblige with a train for every occasion. So tomorrow's traveller should find, like the graduates of the French Waiters Academy, that life aboard is almost a home from home. Japan, the place that's really railway mad. To keep railways on their toes, the government allows 163 private companies to vie with the state network. The railway's proud boast, to provide a service from the cradle to the grave. In Tokyo, railway-owned department stores that tower over stations. The railways own entire villages, schools, cemeteries, even an all-female opera company. And they run a profitable chain of cinemas. With such spirit, no wonder Japan can flaunt the only rail network in the world today that's actually growing. Yet another private station being opened in Tokyo. Soon, there'll be another ceremony to open a 700-mile extension of the Tokaido line, the world's fastest service. It'll halve the time between Tokyo and southern Japan. A railway in Japan is something to cheer. .8 a.m., Central Station, Tokyo. Staff on the Tokaido line exercise before boarding the super train. Of the 50,000 Tokaido expresses last year, fewer than 30 were delayed for more than 10 minutes. For reliability on this incredible scale, the men have to be as efficient as the machines. The syllabus at the train academy includes judo. It may come in handy later if a railman ever has to serve on Tokyo's commuter network. Over 3 million people commute into Tokyo each day, and each year the number goes up by 10%. The only way the railways keep people moving is to cram 3 times the permitted load into each train. In winter, the situation is worse. People are thicker. They wear overcoats. Like London, Tokyo's commuter belt steadily grows. High-speed trains have shifted population, and Tokyo-style commuting is spreading to other towns. To persuade the hesitant, the railways employ 3,000 professional pushers. It's a career with prospects. Travel to work like a potted shrimp, the slogan of the Tokyo commuters. For many, the nightmare trip began on a super train 100 miles away on the Tokaido line in the new suburbia created by high-speed travel. When super trains come to Britain, commuting may soar. Cities like London, Bristol, Manchester will come within commuting distance of each other. The possible result, as in Japan, a megalopolis, an unbroken city spreading along the railway. But future commuters may find they must elbow their way into an entirely new breed of super train. The hover train. It's the first super train to come from a different stable to the Iron Horse, still a pioneer. It runs only in France, on a test track near Orleans. Propeller-driven, with a top speed of about 200 miles an hour, it's made to run on an air cushion over a single guide rail. Britain is working on a tracked hovercraft too. It'll be noiseless, running on a linear electric motor, and it'll be faster than the French, but still a mere 300 miles an hour. In the French system, 80-seat hover trains like this would dart between cities at the rate of 1 a minute. A silent hover train could link London and Edinburgh in 90 minutes. Its only possible challenger would be in the air, if jump jet airliners are ever allowed to land in our city centres. Trains with wheels could probably be sped up to 300 miles an hour, but long before that, they'd need new tracks to iron out all the bends. That'll be the hover train's big chance. It's easier to build, it's cheap, and in the teeming 70s, would claim hardly more land than an electricity pylon. But in the end, the problem of air resistance as speeds rise may finally force guided transport into a vacuum tube. Pipes are freely used in industry. A train traveling in one at the speed of sound, a pipe dream. The professor of transport at Leeds University, Coman O'Flaherty, doesn't think so.
The concept of tube flight at first seems, well, to put it bluntly, rather daft. But if one looks into history, you can see that gas and oil have been moved by pipeline. Solids, coal moved in slurry form, solids then moved in suspension. It's not too far from this to conceive the idea of people moving in suspension. Now, by this I don't mean feeding people into a pipe and having them go scurry down the helter-skelter down the pipe, but rather having them in some form of a capsule, such as a train, and having it move within an enclosed tubing.
A Japanese professor, Kyonojo Otzawa. He holds the world's land speed record, nearly 1,600 miles an hour, set up here last year by firing a rocket down a pipe. He's working on tube flight. He claims that already today, with only a few minor details to be ironed out, people could be sent from London to Glasgow in 12 minutes. The rocket is a small-scale version of a passenger capsule. Among the trifles still needing attention, G-forces of 50, 10 times what the astronauts must bear. But the professor says he'll have slowed the rocket's acceleration and arrival down to a more relaxing 1.2 G before the year is out. Tin foil is popped into the tube. In this new test, it'll monitor the rocket's passage during the trip. The tube is a mile long. In an earlier test, the rocket stopped by plunging into a water tank. This time, it'll be braked by a row of wooden buffers in the tube. Otzawa is professor of technology at Meiji University. He got his taste for speed while designing wartime bombers.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5,
The world record is equaled, 1,581 miles an hour. But there's been a hitch. 100 feet from the end, the tube is broken, a section mysteriously missing, but the rocket passed safely. Tube flight will probably need years of development. Among the posers, not only how to stop the train safely, but also how to recover it. But it's interested even the American government. It's financing a project that hopes, more modestly, to send a hover train in a tube down the center of motorways. The Japanese still haven't decided if, in their final system, the capsule will use rocket power or simply be sucked along in a vacuum. Undismayed by the difficulties, Otzawa has scheduled another firing, this time a capsule with passengers. There'll only be cockroaches, but they'll have tiny seatbelts made in cotton. The kamikaze cockroach will have its place in transport history when tube flight one day is all the rage. Scientists today have the knowledge, it's money and not know-how that will get a new transport system from the laboratory to the track. How soon before we travel in windowless trains at speeds undreamt of on today's rails? Or in commuter capsules breaking the sound barrier in the rush hour?